English people are the inhabitants of England, which is one of the constituent countries that form the United Kingdom. Their culture, identity, and historical roots can all be traced directly back to England. Over time, English people have grown in number and reached an estimated over than 50 to 60 million, which including those who form the diaspora communities living in countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. They speak the English language, which is a West Germanic language belonging to the larger Indo-European language family. The genetic ancestry of the English people has been shaped over many thousands of years by multiple waves of migration and population movement. These migrations are often grouped into three broad phases. The first phase, the Prehistoric period, which included the arrival of Western hunter-gatherers after the last Ice Age, followed by the migration of Neolithic agriculturalists during Neolithic, and later the influx of Indo-European tribes during the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. The second phase, often referred to as the Romano-Briton period, which involved interaction and intermixing between the ancient Britons and the Romans during their occupation of Britain. The third phase occurred during the early and high Middle Ages, when groups such as the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes arrived, followed later by the Vikings and, finally, the Normans, each leaving a genetic and cultural impact on the population of England. The earliest known migration to the British Isles dates back to the Mesolithic period, which saw the arrival of a population commonly referred to as the Western hunter-gatherers. The Western hunter-gatherers arrived in the British Isles during the Mesolithic period when Britain was connected to Europe via Doggerland. Genetically, they were likely to have had dark skin and blue eyes. Following this period, during the Neolithic era, another significant migration occurred with the arrival of Neolithic agriculturalists whose origin lies in Anatolia, Turkey, and who had migrated to Britain from mainland Europe. These newcomers quickly replaced the hunter-gatherers population to a significant extent and became the dominant population in England. They introduced agriculture to the British Isles and also brought genes associated with lighter skin pigmentation. They also built the famous Stonehenge. However, the dominance of Neolithic agriculturalists did not last for long. During the Bronze Age, the Indo-European tribes migrated to the region and rapidly replaced the earlier agriculturalist population. The Indo-European tribes had descended from the Bell Beaker culture from mainland Europe and brought with them steppe ancestry as well as genes linked to light skin, eyes, and hair. Their migrations continued into the Iron Age, forming the identity of Iron Age Britons. By the end of the Iron Age, the population of England largely consisted of descendants of steppe-derived Indo-European migrants from the Bronze Age, mixed with earlier Neolithic farmer ancestry. The Romans, as the part of expansionist campaign, launched a full invasion and reached the British Isles, where they encountered Iron Age Britons. The Romans ruled the region for almost 4 centuries, but despite the relatively long period of ruling, the genetic impact of the Romans in England was minimal. When the Middle Ages began, England was destined to experience a significant mixture of populations due to the arrival of several Germanic tribes, including the Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and Frisians. Around the 5th century CE, during the period of the collapse of Roman rule in Britain, the Angles began migrating across the North Sea to the British Isles. The Angles were a Germanic tribe whose origins lay in Angeln, a peninsula located in what is now Schleswig-Holstein, in the northern part of modern Germany. They spoke a dialect of the West Germanic language family, which over time developed into what became known as Old English. In England, the Angles settled predominantly in the eastern and northern regions of the country, where they established several of the most important early English kingdoms, including Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia. The Saxons, although already known to have raided England during the Roman period, began migrating on a large scale to England around the same time as the Angles did. They originally came from northern Germany, roughly the area of modern Lower Saxony, as well as parts of the Netherlands. In England, they settled mainly across the southern and southwestern regions, where they established several important Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Wessex, which later became the most powerful, Sussex, the South Saxons, and Essex, the East Saxons. The Jutes originated from the Jutland Peninsula, which is now part of modern-day Denmark. They may have settled in England as mercenaries or traders before establishing more permanent communities. In England, the Jutes primarily settled in the Isle of Wight and Kent, where they helped in establishing an influential empire. The Frisians began migrating around the same time as the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. They originally from the coastal regions of the North Sea, mainly in modern Netherlands and northwest Germany, and were closely related culturally and linguistically to Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. They settled in several regions such as southeast England, East Anglia, Kent, Lincolnshire, and Yorkshire. Viking activity in England began in the late 8th century CE, notably marked by the raid on Lindisfarne in 793. In the mid-9th century, the Great Heathen Army invaded in 865 and conquered Northumbria and East Anglia. However, Wessex, led by Alfred the Great, successfully resisted the advance, and this led to the division of England between Wessex and the Viking-controlled Danelaw. Here, Scandinavian settlers lived alongside locals and enforced Danish laws and customs. Throughout the 10th century, Vikings' raids increased, but Anglo-Saxon kings gradually reconquered the Danelaw, though Viking influence persisted. By the early 11th century, England briefly fell under Danish rule, and in 1066, the Anglo-Saxons defeated the last major Viking invasion led by Norwegian Vikings at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, ending the era of Viking occupation in England. After the Vikings' occupation was over, a new wave of migration was to follow from France. The Norman invasion and conquest of England in 1066 kicked off when William, the Duke of Normandy, took on Harold Godwinson's claim to the throne after the death of Edward the Confessor. William triumphed over Harold at the Battle of Hastings and was crowned king on Christmas Day that same year. In the years that followed, he put down regional uprisings, most famously during the harrying of the North, and replaced the Anglo-Saxon nobility with Norman lords. This conquest sparked a major wave of Norman migration to England. These newcomers established their dominance through extensive castle building and the introduction of Norman French culture, law, and governance. Norman settlers intermarried with local families. The Norman occupation lasted for a century. In 2022, a genetic study on Anglo-Saxon migration and the genetics of the English population shed light on the genealogical origins of the English people, as well as the role of these migrations in shaping population patterns. The study showed that English identity was formed from three main ancestry components: Continental Northern European, CNE ancestry, Late Iron Age British ancestry, and Iron Age France-like ancestry. The Continental Northern European ancestry reflects migration from areas like northern Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark, including Anglo-Saxon related groups. Present-day English show about 25% to 47% Continental Northern European ancestry, highest in southeastern, eastern, and central England. For examples, Sussex, East Midlands, East Anglia. Then you have the Late Iron Age British ancestry, representing people lived in Britain before Roman migrations. Basically, Iron Age Britain. Modern English have about 11% to 57% of this ancestry, which tends to be higher in Western and Northern England. Lastly, the third one was the Iron Age-like French ancestry that is genetically similar to Iron Age populations from what is now France, Belgium, and nearby Germany. This ancestry makes up about 14% to 43% of ancestry in England, with higher values in eastern parts.